Well, in the follow-up season, the third Doctor has to celebrate Dalek Day. That's right. The Day of the Dalek. Yeah, obviously not. No, a day is very specific, as this is a time travel story of sorts. Well, no, not of sorts. I just mean it's not going to deal with, meeting historical figures or anything like that. But it is a time travel story, which is appropriate for the Doctor, because back then he was still a Time Lord, But anyway, so there's this plot. So you have worries of World War III and a diplomatic mission in jeopardy, and a mysterious man in a camo outfit suddenly appears and attacks this diplomat, and you're off to the races about what this is all about and who's behind it and everything. Some weird, almost Klingon looking guys show up, which, for the time and costuming goes, it's kind of not bad of a makeup job for those guys. They were kind of stupid and lumbering around, but you got to understand the Daleks had to make use of those guys because, they hadn't figured out how to make their little carrier machines float, and those guys could get through the swampy pasture and stuff like that, and also stairs. So they were good to have around. It's just, they needed to be a little faster, So a unit gets involved, of course. The Doctor is looking into this. Joe stumbles into things, ends up traveling to the future, completely falls hook, line, and sinker for the story of a guy who's in league with the Daleks, who turns out in the end to be a good guy. He's just in a terrible position. You know how it is. And but the whole crux of it is World War III did indeed break out. And the Earth was devastated by this, of course, and they were so weakened that the Daleks later, in the future, invade and conquer the Earth, and that sort of thing. And so you have these resistance fighters have now managed to steal Dalek time travel technology to do the Terminator mission, where they travel back in time to stop this, what they believe to be this rogue diplomat who's up to no good. And if they stop him and kill him before he can attack this diplomatic mission, which sparks the Third World War, then their horrible future of living under the Daleks will have never happened. Although it could still probably happen, because the Daleks were more than capable of conquering the Earth, even as it was in the current time. So it would just be a little harder work for them. But whatever, that was their plan, and that's what they were trying to do. And so there was, mystery afoot here and there about who's really behind it. Of course, it was in the title, so you always knew they were going to show up, and that sort of thing. For a lot of elements of it, it's fine here and there. Some of the location shots don't work out so great for them. They've fixed it up in later versions and that kind of thing, but I mean, but it's what they had to work with. And actually, in the little tunnel where the Doctor first encounters the Dalek is not too bad, where it just appears, and he's like, oh, so now I've got an idea what's going on. And it's another one of those where they realize that Joe calls him the Doctor. The Doctor! So they analyze him, and suddenly you get the visions of the previous Doctors. It's always a tried and true thing that happens throughout the series. So, and boy, I mean, he looked pretty brutalized too. I guess it's really painful to, rip information from your mind. But the rest of it is, there's kind of setups here for like the resistance fighters leader, and then there's a guy who's more of an a-hole about it and that kind of thing. Doesn't really go anywhere, but within the context of it all, I guess it doesn't matter too much. It's just at the end, the beginning, where it seems to imply that what was his name, Sir Reginald, the diplomat. It almost as if he knew something was up, like when the guy storms into his home there to kill him and fails to do so. I thought, oh, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, he's in on something with the Daleks. Perhaps he really is a traitor to humanity and all this sort of thing. Nah. He's just in politics and diplomacy and stuff, so he's got secrets all over the place that they never got into. He probably thought this was some hitman settling a score from some other crap he did. No, it was a guy from the future trying to fight Daleks. He's like, what? Well, what is that? So anyway, back and forth through time and all this stuff, and the Doctor, they don't trust him. Now they do trust him. He makes a good guy out of the evil guy who was working for the Daleks, and all that. He ends up sacrificing himself and all this stuff. Unit being involved, so on and so forth. Captain Yates really lords it over Sergeant Benton. Sometimes he's just another guy. But it gives them a differentiation between the two, because really you could eliminate one, because you basically have the same character, except that he outranks him, and so he bosses him around, and so I kind of appreciated that. But ultimately, it ends with the overall scheme and plan for the Resistance is to prevent this moment in time from happening and all that. You can understand that. But in the doing so, and this is typical of time paradox stories, is that in the attempt to change it, they're the ones who actually cause it to happen. So one of their missing soldiers, he's got an explosive, and he's going to kill Sir Reginald. And then finally the Doctor catches up with him and tells him, he says, no, you're actually the one who causes this, because all the diplomats were meeting within the building and everything, which Unit and the Doctor managed to get them out, so he wasn't going to kill them now, but he was explaining this to the guy, and the guy's, oh man. But then the Daleks show up. They're trying to stop this from happening too. And then the guy realizes, well, now I can kill these Daleks and spare the 20th century Earth from their menace or whatever. And so he sacrifices himself, and the Doctor's like, all right, you're not going to try a sonic screwdriver or something? Nah. So the whole place blows up and all that. But here's the problem. So now the event that sparked World War III never happened. So ultimately their mission succeeds, but they never travel back in time to make it happen, because the entire episode, it should have been, they come to, and maybe only the Doctor realizes what happens because, I don't know, the magic of a Time Lord or whatever. They could have done it, but they didn't. They just said, oh, well, we solved that problem. Of course, in other theories of time travel, it would mean that there's an alternate timeline. And so there's an alternate timeline where the Daleks did conquer the Earth after World War III and all this sort of thing. And then there's this other timeline that you're now, I guess, living in through the Doctor Who series, where it didn't, so everything's fine. And those Resistance people never existed, because events spiraling out of that would have resulted in their births and whatnot. It would be some other people living in that time zone where there was never an invasion or what have you. But that's the only way for paradox like that to be explained. The timeline that you want to change, you never can. You can just create a new one where it didn't happen, and escape into that one. Except probably more than likely, your whole family never existed, and you're some weirdo from another timeline. It's just like, oh well, I don't know. Maybe I can get a job at a gas station or something, But. And more to it is like the Doctor is still trying to fix the TARDIS, and he's working on it. And then there's this little accident, and it causes a parallel timeline right there in the room where there's two different. There's another Doctor and another Joe, and then he says, "Oh no, that's not supposed to happen," and so he fixes it, and then they disappear, and Joe's all baffled and doesn't understand what happened, and he tries to explain it, and well, where did they go? And he says, well, back to their timeline, meaning that not that they were Joe and the Doctor in a few minutes in the future or something along those lines that you could have done by this displacement. but that they're from an alternate timeline. So I guess I don't know if that was the intent. Later, you you conclude that that's all the Resistance fighters achieved was an alternate timeline. But I don't know. But it is interesting because Pertwee Doctor is the only one until the New Who thing came along, as I recall it, that dealt with alternate timelines or multiverse type situation where he literally goes to another Earth and all that sort of thing in Inferno. So he was floating around, and this is sort of an indication of that sort of thing. Alternate timeline, a little different, if you will, than the basics of there's different types of descriptions of multiverse. One is that you have a cluster of galaxies, and then a void, and then another cluster of galaxies, which is an exact duplicate of the one or maybe a little different, but basically the same. And then there's the dimensional effects of different universes existing in the same space, but on a different, dimensional frequency or some such. And then there's alternate timeline from all those idiot time travelers messing with everything. Unless, of course, there's also time travel just by the natural, weird, bizarre physics we've yet to discover that happens in the universe. Unless you have Archimedes' dial from Indiana Jones, then you can find where time travel happens. Some crap like that. But in the actions of it, alternate timelines could form, I suppose. But in the case of here, you have the Doctor who has a, very powerful time machine. Not working at the moment, but when he keeps messing with it, these things can occur. But is it really in the thinking and presentation of the story overall? Not really. But it's easy to conclude it because the events do happen within the story. So anyway, there you go. Happy Dalek Day for Doctor Who.